Good afternoon. Am I on? Are we all right? Great. Hello, everybody. I have the challenge of keeping you all entertained during what's the time of the day that I like to put my head down and have a quiet time. This is like me trying to run my television at home. Terrific. Well, thank you so much for sticking around to listen to my talk about a very local case study from Eastern Connecticut and Western Rhode Island. Briefly, quick overview, plug for the Nature Conservancy. If you're not familiar with the organization, we're considered the world's largest environmental organization. We're responsible for protecting about 12 million acres of land here in the U.S. and about 30 million acres worldwide. And we're probably best known as an organization that goes out and buys land for natural values. But as the organization began to direct its resources towards working and investing locally in communities where we wanted to see conservation succeed, we started to experiment with a host of other strategies. And my experience working in an area called the Borderlands here that I just referenced was no different. And my story today is our experiment. It's almost sort of an experiment of experiment about engaging people at the local level to affect some of that change and how they grow. In a way, what you might hear from me today is a little bit of a counterpoint from what we heard earlier. Dr. Gutfreund, it is very much a bottom-up approach to changing, recognizing that the federal system creates a number of disincentives that lead to growth patterns that no one seems to want in their community, and yet property tax and local land use decisions are vested at the local level. And in New England, clicker the right way, this is our form of government. This group of people, this may be some of our relatives, getting together in a room to make decisions together is very much part of the New England tradition. And what we've found in this experiment, as you'll hear as we go a little bit, is that this can be a very successful way of creating the foundations for change. The town hall version of government that we have here provides a framework where people are very much willing and ready to engage in a group setting, in a series of meetings, and in a way that's difficult sometimes to replicate in other places around the country. So in one way, I think we're very lucky. I was very lucky to be able to try to do this here in New England, even though one of these people may be very much a cranky Yankee that doesn't want to see a whole lot changed. But you wonder what someone's going to say next when you're doing local stakeholder engagement, which is sort of the professional facilitator's word for small d democracy. This is former Rockwell's painting that was promoting at the time, I think, buying war bonds. It was entitled Freedom of Speech. And this is very much a part of what happens when you engage in what James Surowiecki wrote a book about recently called The Wisdom of Crowds. The Wisdom of Crowds lays out the idea that getting groups of people together to make decisions can very much lead them to making the types of decisions, maybe for different reasons and for different outcomes and different benefits for them, the kinds of things you would like to see happen there. So letting people have the opportunity to talk about what it is that's important to them, what it is they'd like to see in their community, what they hate about this. I mean, that's usually what most of these conversations start out. This is what I don't like. I hate it when it's like that. We don't want to look like Warwick. I can't tell you how many times I heard people say that. And the work, this is sort of a modern day 21st century version of that in the town of Exeter, where we had about 100 people. This is just a little cross-section of them participate in what was called the chip game, the fun little sort of resource trade-off, hands-on game, literally, where the map of their town was laid out on a grid. They had to make decisions about where all the houses that could be built in the community, where are they all going to go? We want to put them where our regulations say they're going to go, or we want to put them someplace different. Quick backdrop on what we're talking about here. We are here in New London. We're just off the map. I don't get some feedback walking over here, but We are just over here on the edge. And this Borderlands region, you see that little Pacman guy on the left? That is an area that our esteemed scientists in Boston within the Nature Conservancy identified as one of about 30 of the most important forest areas to protect in the entire Northeast. Yes, it's right over the Thames River, right here on the state line, just as important as the Pine Barrens in New Jersey and some of the big forests across the Berkshires. We won't get into reasons why that is, but I was hired to come out and work in this Pacman, if you will. In fact, I lived right in the mouth of the Pacman, for what that's worth. The area, we gave it a name. We called it the Pawcatuck Borderlands. Oops, this guy's got a lot of it. So the Pawcatuck River drains out of the eastern and southern portions of that area. We thought that was kind of an evocative name. Also, the fellow that runs the Eastern Division for the Nature Conservancy worked in Arizona for many years and helped develop the Malpai Borderlands group, so he's just rebranding the Borderlands term. On the right-hand side, you see census tract information, and the green is the more green census tracts in terms of housing density, and so you sort of get a sense from the demographic point of view that bears out the fact that that is a relatively undeveloped area. I'm going to get into a little bit of the pretty picture part of this, 136,000 acres. But you notice that as part of, there's sort of a nested thing going on here, and that became evident when we started to have conversations with people about what this region meant to them. So already early on in my time working here in the Pacman, if you will, we started bringing people together within the 10 towns that are in that forest blob there. And we had a very focused, very organized series of meetings with a broad spectrum of interest groups involved, from developers to conservationists to selectmen and on and on. And we asked them what it was about this area that they felt a shared ownership of. If a person lives and works in the town of Exeter, what is it that they have in common with someone in North Stonington? Or what do they not share because of the fact the state line runs down the middle? What we found were a couple things. One was no one liked our Pacman, that they much more identified with all of the towns along the border. They said, well, culturally, we have a lot more to do with, say, people in Killingly and Gloucester than we do in your own little sort of forest science definition of the world. So right away, we, as a small team of people starting to think about this, expanded our conversation. So that was sort of the beginning of us listening to what this region was. So it quickly expanded into those 20 towns, not too far away from where we're sitting this afternoon. So it is a lovely place. I'm sure some of you get over there. Route 49 in particular is a beautiful drive if you ever want to get over there in the springtime and enjoy it. But one of the things that people started to talk about quite quickly was the fact that there were villages scattered throughout this area, and that's an important theme that we'll come back to. So there's a little brief timeline of how we have continued to engage people at these multiple levels, and I'm not going to go into all the detail, but this little enhanced satellite image is a fun thing to put your eyes on, and you start to realize that this was a particularly interesting undeveloped area sandwiched in between about 40 million people from Boston to DC. And that at a meta-regional level, this is a place that was definitely going to undergo some change without something that went beyond just buying land and doing it 80 acres at a time. That cultural shift was important so that that green area maintained as much of its green qualities as possible. This is before Twitter, when we were doing all this, but we did develop what we thought was quite a interesting and useful website, and it's actually still up there today, and there's quite a bit of information on there, borderlandsproject.org. And we included a map gallery on there that you can take a look at if you're interested in this sort of placemaking exercise, and this is all lead up to the small d democracy stuff, that we showed the region from a host of different viewpoints, from where people are driving to where do they work, where are the housing densities, where are the income differences, and so on. So that that was a nice first step forward in identifying the way the region works. In the course of those regional conversations, we started to ask questions about commonalities. Said, okay, we've sort of defined a region, and you've identified that you all feel sort of removed from the power bases in Providence and Hartford. It's hard to feel like you're removed from Providence when you live in Rhode Island, but it's true. And people started to talk to us a little bit about some common themes. And at one very important get-together, where we had about 70 of these broad people from across those 20 towns together, we took the conservation-minded people and put them on one side of the room. And we took the development-minded people and we put them on the other side of the room. We kept them apart. After all this time, we tried to get them together and get them to talk. We said, all right, now you guys go your own corners. And you all talk from an economic development point of view, what it is about this region that you want to see more of. From a conservation point of view, so we're trying to frame it as positive. What is it that you want to see more of? Well, people said, obviously we love the forested landscape, we love the fact that it's rural, it's an important part of where we are, it's special, and people identify with the woods, basically. And people also identify with some of the terrific or functioning downtowns, places like Putnam and Westerly, that are terrific places to go and shop and to work and to live. And both groups, independently, they both got together at the end of that meeting, and this was sort of the beginning, this is the biggest aha moment of this whole exercise to launch the village pilot was, the development people said, we need more village-based growth. Economic development is going to make sense in a small, compact framework moving forward for our region. The conservation people came together and said, we need more village-based growth. And the two sides said, well, we finally agree on something here. Not that there's been a lot of conflict, but we now have a sense that there's a shared piece of the landscape, both physical and cultural, that we can move towards in some fashion, that in fact already exists here. And that's a picture of Jewett City up there in Griswold, taken by balloon, not the best way to do aerial photography, but fun. And that this is the vision that people wanted us to continue to promote. But the problem was, we don't have the resources locally to do it. Especially in 2004, 2005, when we were having a lot of these conversations, when the development community was overwhelming local planning and zoning staff and the boards. If anybody lived around here at that time and were involved in local politics know that every planning and zoning meeting was just slam-packed with development proposals. So they were very much playing catch-up. They had no resources to think about the future. And this is particularly true in Connecticut, less so in Rhode Island. So we launched what we called the Village Innovation Pilot. And I'll get into who the we was in a minute, where we target professional planning assistants to communities who were, quote unquote, in the right place to do this kind of work. It would be done in 3 phases. One, called the Heart and Soul Visioning exercise. 2, some sort of a baseline assessment of the conditions in the community. And 3, implementation. Now, this is the point where I want to lay out, our idea when we started this was to do this in 18 months. And that was in 2007. It's 2011 today, and I would say our towns are still in the baseline assessment mode. So part of my message to you in bringing about the message of change at the local level, and you can also say the same thing for the halls of Congress at the federal level. It's a very long process. And at lunch, as I said today, it took, we saw the charts yesterday about the rate of vehicle miles traveled. We did not go from horse and buggy to a car culture in 5 years. In the course of a generation or 2. So we're not going to go to this new idea of how we want to grow our communities overnight either. So that's been an important lesson for me, is that these kinds of things are very long-term, But if you go slow to go fast, it's the kind of thing that can create a culture in that decision-making body, in this case the local community in New England form of government, create the environment where they can make the kinds of changes that are important in terms of smart growth. The groups involved that it took to pull this off was remarkable. So I'm up here from the Nature Conservancy and representing our interest in seeing the environment it conserved rather. But the other critical partner in all this was the Orton Family Foundation. And if any of you are involved in working with communities in New England or in the Rockies, the Orton Family Foundation is an incredible resource for you to take advantage of. They're an operational foundation that will both provide funding, but most importantly, expertise. And I learned early on that this kind of placemaking and then moving on into direct sort of civic engagement, don't do it at home. Engage people and work with people that have been doing this across the region or across the country that can bring some of the best lessons learned into the experience, because making mistakes is part of the process, but the less mistakes you make, the faster you're going to go. So Orton Family Foundation at ortonfoundation.org is also a terrific website if you want to look up some great case studies of places all across the Rockies and New England about where they've drilled down, worked with youth, worked with the arts community, worked with the elderly, and in every case about building this heart and soul of the community through the wisdom of crowds approach. We contracted with the University of Connecticut Extension Service, the Green Valley Institute, which is located up in Brooklyn, to be a sort of project manager for us. So Orton and the Nature Conservancy serve the strategic oversight role. And one of the first things the Orton Family Foundation did, they did two things starting out meeting with them. First of all, they said, okay, you want to go out and you want to work with a community and you want to see them promote village-style growth. Have you thought about actually asking the community if they want to do that? You're going to work with a few people or with the town manager to make that happen? And we sat there and thought, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, we don't really want to do a whole lot of public meetings because we've already done a lot of public meetings, but they were at a regional scale, and if we want the communities to actually really buy into this, I suppose, yeah, we probably should. So that was the first key thing. Orton pushed us to develop what they called then the heart and soul. It was a bit of an experiment that I referred to before, that they wanted to work with the town, two towns in this case, to see if you really engage deeply in a community, what are the kinds of things that worked, what are the kinds of things that didn't work, and over time did it create a change in the culture of the community. And so we sort of agreed to be a guinea pig, especially since they were giving us some funding and terrific intellectual resources to make it happen. They also recommended another great thing, and this is a nice idea, either at a regional or even at a small municipal level, was to send out an RFP for support for projects. We invited all 20 towns within the Borderlands region to apply to be a part of this village innovation pilot that would help communities understand how they could grow in a village style moving forward, whether they had a village or not. And all through this heart and soul visioning pre-work, and then through what we would then hope was an 18-month process to get through to implementation. We have 20 towns in the Borderlands, as I mentioned. 12 towns applied. So we knew we were onto something right there. 8 were in Connecticut, 4 were in Rhode Island. Again, that's an indication that there's less opportunities for funding in Connecticut for these kinds of projects. And it was a terrific way for us to go through the process of saying which towns are ready for this kind of thing. And that's an important concept if you're thinking about where to do a project like this from a strategic management point of view. We had some very sensible, what I thought were some sensible criteria, and it allowed us, in the end, to pick 2 very good towns for a couple of reasons. I won't get into a whole lot of them, but the town of Exeter in Rhode Island and the town of Killingly in Connecticut. 2 very different towns. The town of Killingly is a mill town. It's right up here in the 95 corridor. In fact, it has several villages within the town of Killingly. It's pretty average size. It's a distressed community economically. but yet one that has a pretty good economic development track record. Their development park is fully subscribed and they're building a new one. Consider Exeter, on the other hand. Half the town is owned by the state of Rhode Island as conservation land. They have one part-time planner. When I say part-time, I don't mean 20 hours a week, I mean 1 day a week. There is no village in the town of Exeter. There are a number of old historic sites of villages around the town, but nothing today where you could even walk up and say, here's the village. The Exeter Mall is the most, I wish I had a picture of this. It's 2 stores, it's a pizza place and a laundromat, and it looks like the bricks are going to crumble at any moment. So, and Killingly had just completed Killingly Commons, the redevelopment of the Anchor Glass site. So they're very different places in terms of the economic stratus, very different places in terms of growth. The one thing that Exeter that really caught our eye was that commuter rail was planned to be extended from the Boston to Providence line. And it's just been, you may have just heard it's been extended to the airport, but the second stop on that line is going to be in the town of North Kingstown, which is 2 miles away from Exeter, and a major state arterial, Route 2, runs right through Exeter. So anybody who's involved in planning understands that this means a lot of people moving to the town, this bedroom community of Exeter, in, say, the next 10 to 20 years. And it's a sleepy place today, but it won't be in the years to come. So we developed pilot teams in each town. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't really sound that complicated, or really, it seems like common sense. You'd have a team there. I thought it was common sense at the time, but it never occurred to me that just educating the people that step forward in their community and says, yes, I want to work on this village pilot. This is a great thing for our community. I own a mill, I'm on the planning board, I own a farm, I'm a former council person. All these people have some terrific backgrounds and really understood the issues. They stepped forward, they said, I'm going to volunteer to serve on this committee. Now you have to convince me why any of this is important. So we instantly had an educational process on our hands that none of us had ever planned for. Just getting the core people, the people you would think would be the most ready for your message, the message that we've heard today, who are sitting on the boards that are making decisions, they're still not quite ready for what it is that we're talking about when it gets to the reality of things. Everyone's coming at it from their own point of view. Yeah, I want to preserve farmland because I'm a farmer, but don't restrict my ability to put in a wedding pavilion because that's important to, a non-farm income for me. And don't you restrict my ability to redevelop my mill into shopping when really what you need is mixed to moderate, mixed to low income housing in your community. So instantly, people who you think are ready are not going to be as ready as you think. So having this blend of groups overseeing all this was an important exercise in getting the conversation started. And I do want to put a plug in for Dotson Associates, a consulting group that we hired to do a lot of the hands-on planning in the communities. They really did care about getting this done. They weren't just doing this to get billable work. They did a lot of work pro bono, especially towards the end of the project, which is a terrific outcome. So now we've got these pilot teams. Now we're starting to connect with people in the communities, and the pilot teams were intended to go out and make sure everybody then would get engaged with us. Instant roadblock. You put up a sign, people come talk about your community. 6 people come, 12, maybe 20 people come. Pilot team gets down. Nobody ever comes to these things. We knew right away we needed a bigger toolbox, to steal a phrase from Jaws. Terrific technological tool in all this for us was keypad polling. If you've never had a chance to do it, it is a great way to run a public meeting. And I'll get to the challenge of getting people to come to the meeting, but when you got people there, having people voice their opinions silently through a clicker, then you put up a picture of a big box development or the local produce stand or the strip mall or what. We showed them 20, 30 slides. Which of these do you want to see in Exeter? Do you want to see more of these or less of these? You have 30 seconds. Everyone votes. He says, boom, here's the results. So it's a very democratic way, especially in those small meeting settings where you sometimes get the usual 3 people who go on and on like I am right now about what they want to see happen in their community. It's a great way to break some of those barriers down for the quiet people in the room who care a lot about their community and may even have a very important role to play outside the meeting, to have their opinions voiced. You know, how did we get these people to these meetings? Well, as I mentioned, not everyone's going to show up just by putting an ad in the paper. Some of the simple ways that we try to get people there, just not that effective. Town of Killingly then participated in that, include this in the whole toolbox concept, what they called the discovery process. And this is run by James Kent Associates out of Colorado, where James Kent sent in a couple trained facilitators, sat down with the people on the pilot team and said, here is how you are going to go out this weekend to beauty parlors, to bars, to the mall, to the car wash, to the soccer fields. You're all going to fan out across the community, and you're going to have a set of 4 or 5 questions, broad questions, and ones where you can get a lot of information out of people, and you're going to sit down with total strangers. You're going to walk into this bar that you've always been terrified of stepping foot into, and you're going to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, so it's not too dangerous, and get a sense, what do you guys care about your community? What is your heart and soul? What do you think the heart and soul of Killingly is? And they can say, well, I can't get a job in this town anymore, but I love the fact that I can go fishing on Lake Alexander. That's a great place for me to go on the weekends. It really helps me relax. And suddenly, by going out to the community, the pilot team realized, we're onto something here. Going to those people in places where they're comfortable and talking to me is a much more productive way of getting information than just waiting for you to show up at a meeting at 7 o'clock at town hall. The folks in Killingly had their, I think it was their 300th anniversary of the town, I think it was. They had a big fair. They had folks from the pilot team put up a tent with clipboards. They saw there was face painting at the booth next door. Huge line of families waiting to go in. Families are the hardest group. Young parents, parents of any age, hardest group of people to get to come to public meetings. They went to the families where they were, face painting line at the Sesquicentennial, and asked them questions. What do you think is important at Killingly? Terrific way to get information. So the teams are starting to get, okay, there's ways to get everybody involved. Now, when we got people to the meetings, which they did do over time, there was a couple things, and I'm sorry that this picture of Exeter is very fuzzy, but what you would see if it wasn't so darn fuzzy right here is we did a build-out analysis for the town of Exeter, not rocket science to many of the people in this room. Well, let me tell you, when you tell the people in a community that as of today, there are about 2,000 single-family homes in the town of Exeter, and many people in that town would say, well, that's too many. Well, guess what? The way the town is zoned now, if you take out infrastructure needs and wetlands and things like that, you'd be looking at an additional 3,000 single-family homes in the town of Exeter. That gets people's attention. And that was the starting point for the chip game meeting, which is a great tool that was run by a guy also out of Colorado, Steve Mullen, who came out and pulled together a map of the town of Exeter, put a grid over the top of it, and said, all right, here's your bag of 3,000 single-family homes with little chips. Here's a team, here's a group of 5, here's a group of 5. We had about 10 maps going on around the room with groups of citizen folk working on it. You can just put these out wherever you think they can go, or you can take them and come into the bank, I'll be the bank, change in your low-density development for high-density development. So we started to get an idea. Some groups said, well, one group said, you know what, we're just going to start buying land in this town. So we're just going to take these houses and put them over here. So the Nature Conservancy guy says, all right, this has all been worthwhile for me. The rest of the groups were very interesting, had some very interesting takes on where growth could go in their community. and where they don't want growth to go in their community. So they instantly recognize, yes, because of things like travel or highway policy and because of the way we zone our town, growth is going to happen. Growth is inevitable. But where it goes, maybe isn't. So let's talk about that. Killingly did a similar kind of exercise. You see that sketch on the right was more of a hand-drawn exercise. The Killing is an interesting example as well. Don't assume you know the geography that you're working in. The town of Killingly was the applicant for the village pilot. The town tried to engage the entire town, but instantly found out, well, I live in Danielson. I don't have anything to do with East Killingly. I live in Rogers. So people don't identify with the town of Killingly, they identify with the village that they live in. So we narrowed down to the Route 101 corridor right away. And that's an east-west corridor, and so that became the basis of our thinking. And that map on the top showed, all right, similar to the chip game, if we wanted to put growth in certain places, where would it go? Or if we did a build-out in Nemesis, like you saw up there, where would it go? So Exeter, you see the circles, that's where we want the growth to go. So now we're starting to see products from all this. Killingly, here's the map. All right, the I-95 corridor is that zigzag line. Let's promote growth in these other areas. Let's buy up. So the wisdom of crowds. We went to these folks to say, what do you want your town? We wanted to have them promote villages. They were the ones that said, well, I like Killingly because of water, and I like to go on canoe trips and those kinds of things. So let's create a village. So everyone came to the same kind of ideas that we had, but from a different point of view. So now that we're wrapping up that first phase, we have some terrific reports. These are all on the website, Vision for Exeter. And the reason I mention that is that they mailed this 6-page report to everybody in the town. Everybody in that community got this thing in their mailbox when this visioning phase was done, which is a direct mail. Gosh, what a concept. Yeah, you can do direct mail too, not just Target. And that broadens the reach, all in these kind of concentric circles. We did some very specific case study reports on some tools that they could use. So where are we today in these two towns? I can tell you that with great certainty, what we've done in this process is create a sense in the community that they want to do something different, and they want to collect the information or make the statutory changes needed to make it happen. Killingly, and sort of the expect the unexpected part of all this, developed the whole curriculum in the school around water and around the history of that Route 101 corridor. Who would have known? So this is a terrific way of getting people engaged. Whether it can serve the environment, yet to be seen. But I would say to you that having people have a strong sense of where they're living and why they live there is the foundation for some more good work. Exeter, no, this is not the lining of a rabbit cage. This is the series of little dot exercise. Remember all these dots on here? Well, there's too many villages on there, so where are we going to do them? Now they're getting close. They're getting close to where they're going to put a village in their community. What are the rules we got out of this? Go slow to go fast. I mentioned that before. Expect the unexpected. Killingly launched an program in their schools, and they launched a Paddle Killingly group because all of a sudden they heard all these people came out of the woodwork and said, we love our rivers and ponds. And again, from an environmental point of view, that can only lead to good things. Don't expect everyone knows what we're talking about. My village is your strip mall, is your hamlet, is your subdivision. So it's important to understand language and all this. And that top picture, boy, it's terrible, but that's Route 12 101 corridor. It's just a picture of everything that's wrong with suburban America. So is this this is sort of the subhead for the whole talk. Is this a promising direction? Yes, if work in the right place. Our RFP process got us into that, so and engagement we got eventually. Are you prepared and feel self-secure enough to embrace the wisdom of crowds and let the people that come to these things tell you what's important to them? And if you have the partnerships, economic development, conservation, planning, education, the more these groups are involved, the more successful you'll be. Thank you.